Hello class, my name is Lance Geist. This is personal protective and life-saving equipment as referenced from 29 CFR section 1926.95 through 107 subpart E. The focus of today's presentation will be to inform you of some important things you'll need to know about personal protective equipment that will help you work safely in industry. First, we're going to talk about the importance of PPE in the workplace. We'll cover topics such as why is PPE important and typical workplace injuries. Next, we'll talk about types of PPE, such as head protection, eye and face protection, hearing protection, respiratory protection, and fall protection. Finally, we'll conclude this class with a short quiz that will assess your knowledge of the material covered. Before we begin, please watch this short video depicting some of the hazards you may encounter in industry. See if you can count how many unsafe acts were performed, and tell me at the end of the video how many of you have seen acts like these being performed in your workplace. Hopefully none of you perform acts like those we just saw in your workplace. So now that we have a bit better understanding of the reasons we need PPE in the workplace, let's talk about why it's important. Even though safety controls such as engineering and administrative controls are applied in your workplace, there are hazards that will still remain. PPE is designed to protect the worker from these unavoidable hazards. Some of those hazards might be contaminated air, where you would need a respirator or self-contained breathing apparatus. Dropped or falling objects, where you would need head and foot protection. Contact with dangerous chemicals or extreme heat or cold, in which case gloves, aprons, and face shields would be required. You might encounter flying debris, in which case goggles, safety glasses, and face shields would protect you. And you might encounter sharp objects, where gloves and proper clothing would protect you. PPE is designed to minimize or eliminate potential for injury to occur. Usually it's the last measure of defense between you and the injury, and is the only barrier between the person and the potential hazard. Finally, we want to ensure personal safety by promoting PPE awareness. Statistics show that employees who are trained in safe work practices are more likely to work safe and will also promote safe work practices. Simply stated, safety-conscious employees work safe. Have a look at some of the more typical workplace injuries that might occur as a result from not wearing the correct PPE. Do you suppose the man in the top left wore the right fall protection? Or the person in the top right had his gloves on? What about the man in the bottom left? Was he wearing his hard hat? Or the person on the bottom right? Did they have the proper footwear on? Has anybody ever personally experienced or known a co-worker who has experienced any of these injuries? How did it happen? Could they have done anything differently to prevent the injury? What might have happened differently if the person had worn proper PPE? Explain a situation where you wore PPE in a hazardous environment. What happened? Injuries such as these are the very reason why PPE is worn in the workplace. Now let's talk about some of the different types of PPE you'll be required to wear in industry. We'll begin with head protection. 29 CFR 1926.100 subpart A states, employees working in areas where there is a possible danger of head injury from impact or from falling or flying objects or from electrical shocks and burns shall be protected by protective helmets. So let's talk about this. Why do we need such a regulation? Isn't wearing head protection on the job just common sense? ANSI Standard Z89.1 through 1986 requires that any head protective device used in an industrial setting must provide at least a certain amount of protection. It sets a minimum standard for the effectiveness of head protective devices when used in the workplace. Protective helmets and hard hats should be able to resist penetration from objects, be able to absorb the shock of a blow, be water resistant and slow burning, have clear instructions explaining proper adjustment and replacement of the suspension and headband. There are two types of hard hats used in industry, Type 1 and Type 2. Type 1 is designed to reduce the blow from impacts to the top of the head only. Type 2 is designed to reduce the blow from a lateral, side, or a top impact. Additionally, hard hats are classified into 3 classes. Class A provides impact and penetration resistance and limited voltage protection up to 2200 volts. Class B provides the highest level of electrical resistance up to 20,000 volts. They also provide protection from impact and penetration hazards by flying and falling objects. Class C provides lightweight comfort and impact protection, but offers no protection from electrical hazards. Now let's talk about eye and face protection. 29 CFR 1926.102 Subpart A states, employees shall be provided with eye and face protection equipment when machines or operations present potential eye or face injury from physical, chemical, or radiation agents. Think about how important your eyesight is to your normal function in everyday life. How different might your life be if you could no longer see out of one or both of your eyes? ANSI Standard Z87.1 through 1989 requires any eye or face protective device used in an industrial setting to provide at least a certain amount of protection. It sets a minimum standard for the effectiveness of eye and face protective devices when used in the workplace. In order to be suitable, eye and face protection should, at a minimum, protect against a specific workplace hazard or hazards, fit properly and be reasonably comfortable to wear, provide unrestricted vision and movement, and be durable and cleanable. Some of the different types of eye and face PPE you may be required to wear include safety spectacles, which are impact-resistant lenses and frames that completely cover the eyes, goggles, which are tight-fitting eyewear that completely covers the eyes and facial area surrounding the eyes, welding shields, which are constructed with a filtered lens to protect eyes from infrared burns. They also protect the face from flying debris produced during welding and cutting operations. Laser safety goggles, which protect the eyes against intense concentrations of light produced by lasers. And face shields, which provide facial protection from dust and splashes, but do not provide adequate impact protection. Can you hear me now? That's right, we're talking about hearing protection. 29 CFR 1926.101 Subpart A states, whenever it is not feasible to reduce the noise levels or duration of exposure, ear protective devices shall be provided and used. Now, has anyone personally experienced work-related hearing loss? How has it affected you? Did you or didn't you wear hearing protection, and why? Know that there is no standard for hearing protection devices. They must simply be effective at reducing audible noise level. What is standardized is the amount of time employees can be exposed to high levels of noise, otherwise known as an exposure limit. This information is compiled in hearing and protection conservation practices, such as Appendix B of 29 CFR 1910.95, 29 CFR 1910.95 Subpart C, and OSHA Publication 3074. The permissible exposure limits to excessive noise depends upon several factors. Those are the noise level as measured in decibels, the duration of exposure to the noise, whether employees move between work areas with different noise levels, and whether noise is generated from one or multiple sources. Some of the types of hearing PPE that can protect you from damaging noise levels include single-use earplugs, which are typically self-forming waxed cotton, foam, silicone rubber, or fiberglass wool. Preformed or molded earplugs, which are individually fitted by a professional and can be disposable or reusable. And earmuffs, which seal around the ear. They're typically not as effective as earplugs, but when used in conjunction with earplugs, they provide a double barrier. Because the air we breathe is critical to our health, selecting the proper respiratory protection in the workplace is equally as critical. 29 CFR 1910.134 Subpart A, Paragraph 2 states, A respirator shall be provided when such equipment is necessary to protect the health of the employee. The employer shall additionally provide respirators which are applicable and suitable for the purpose intended. Can anyone describe a situation where a respirator would be required in the workplace? What type of respirator would you use and why? What could happen if you use the wrong type of respirator? All respirators used in industry must be certified for use by the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, or NIOSH. It sets a minimum standard for the effectiveness of respiratory protective devices used in the workplace. All respirators are categorized into two types: IDLH certified, or immediately dangerous to life and health. These are used in oxygen-deficient or vapor-laden atmospheres, where 1 or 2 breaths without proper respiratory equipment can be deadly. And the second type is non-IDLH certified. These are used where proper oxygen content exists, but hazardous airborne particles present a reasonable threat to health. Among the two primary types of respirators are many different models which are designed for use in very specific atmospheres. When talking about IDLH certified respirators, one model is the full face piece, pressure demand SCBA, which is an air tank that is worn on the user's back and supplies a minimum of 30 minutes of breathable air into a positive pressure mask, which is worn on the face. Another IDLH certified respirator is the combination full face piece, pressure demand supplied air respirator with auxiliary self-contained air supply. This is a primary air supply which is provided to the user via an air hose that is connected to a manifold on the user's hip. If the primary air supply is lost, the manifold senses the pressure drop and automatically switches to a small reserve air tank, which is usually good for about 15 minutes, and that air tank is worn either on the back or on the hip belt. Talking about non-IDLH respirators, they can vary from the quarter, half, or full face piece with particulate filter apparatus. These respirators accept a variety of replaceable cartridge-style filters that remove airborne contaminants as the user draws air through them by breathing. Finally, a bit about fall protection. 29 CFR 1926.502, Subpart A, Paragraph 2, states, employers shall provide and install all fall protection systems required for an employee before the employee begins any work that requires fall protection. Can anyone describe the type of force exerted on the body when a fall from height occurs? True or false? Suppose you land on an object after falling. Is the entire force of the fall absorbed by the body part in contact with the object? Is it easy to understand why controlling a fall with proper fall protection is important? Whenever an employee is exposed to a fall greater than 6 feet in distance from an unprotected side or edge, it is the duty of the employer to implement a suitable guardrail, safety, or personnel fall arrest system to protect the worker from falling. Typical fall protection devices include, but are not limited to, the use of barricades, handrails, and guardrails, safety nets, vertical, horizontal, and retractable lifelines, and personal fall arrest harnesses. In order to protect you from a potential fall, barricades such as handrails and guardrails must be able to withstand at least 200 pounds of force when applied in any direction. When working over 25 feet, a safety net may be required, and that safety net must be able to withstand 17,500 pounds of force. Where suitable anchor points may not exist, a lifeline can typically be installed and must be able to support at least 5,400 pounds of force. Lastly, when working at heights, a fall arrest harness must be worn by the at-risk employee, and that harness must be able to withstand a tensile load of 4,000 pounds.